Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my September wrap-up. I read 16 books in September, a few different genres, so we're gonna go ahead and talk about all those books. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're gonna start with horror, and we're gonna start with a book that was my only 5-star for the month. So sad, but this book was Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. I don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, this story follows Peter, who is a young boy at an orphanage, and one night a group of men show up and they're dragging this guy with him that's got like all these symbols carved into his body, and he's acting crazy. So they bring him in to this orphanage to have the priest kind of help this guy if he can, and unknowingly they're bringing an evil presence into the orphanage that starts to affect the children in crazy ways. This book was so fast-paced, it was creepy, it was scary, there was like gore and violence, and it just is a real page turner. Like from the very beginning you are just like introduced to the character in such a horrific way, and then the book does not let up with the craziness and the violence, and it's one that you definitely make sure you have time before you start reading it, because you'll probably want to read it in one sitting. Next up in horror, we have The Beast You Are by Paul Tremblay, which is a collection of short stories. I gave this overall a 3-star. Most of the stories I didn't really like, and it almost felt like he forgot to end them. They just didn't work for me. I really got no resolution or satisfaction at the end of any of the stories. There was one story that I really loved. The rest of them I have totally forgotten about, so 3 stars. The next one is another short story collection. It is Never Whistle at Night, which is all by Indigenous authors, so it's like Indigenous dark fiction. I gave the collection 4 stars. I thought pretty much, I don't know, not all of them, but majority of the stories were very interesting, and I just love the idea that they're all based around like Native American lore and like folklore. I think is so fascinating, and I just really enjoyed majority of the stories. Each story comes with a little author bio, so you can get introduced to new authors if you haven't heard of them before. So definitely would recommend this collection. The cover's gorgeous. Go pick it up. Then I read Everything the Darkness Eats by Eric LaRocca, which I did end up giving 4 stars. This story follows a town where this man is like taking people. People are disappearing from the town, and they all get traced back to this creepy man, Mr. Crowley, who is involved in a ritual, doing some dark magic. So it was very interesting, very spooky. If you're gonna read it, I would recommend to read it during this time of year, because I feel like it has the perfect like Halloween, October, spooky season, if you will, type of vibes. It's not gonna be for everybody. Like there's definitely 2 different stories that are kind of mixed together in that, and I don't think that will work for everybody, but if you do like Eric LaRocca, then I would recommend giving it a try. And the last one in the horror category is What Kind of Mother by Clay McLeod Chapman. This was one of my most anticipated releases for this year because I love this author and have loved his books in the past, and this one unfortunately just wasn't everything that I was hoping it would be. I gave it 3.5 stars, so it's not horrible. Obviously that's a pretty good rating still. So What Kind of Mother is about this woman who has a daughter that she had when she was very young, when she was a teen, and she moves back to her like hometown, this very small town, and kind of reignites a spark with her like past like high school boyfriend, and they go on this little search together. It's really hard to explain. She starts having these crazy visions of different things, and it's a wild ride. I really can't say much. I think this is a book that you should go in knowing as little as possible, because no matter how much I tell you, like it takes a turn. it goes somewhere totally different. This is definitely a good one if you are fans of like horror that involves motherhood and grief and you like weird things, because this book is definitely weird. It wasn't totally my favorite, but I'm kind of in the middle where I'm like, if you hated this book, I can definitely understand. If you love this book, I can definitely understand that as well. For me, it was just somewhere in the middle, 3.5. Okay, moving on to thrillers now. I read The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. This was an ARC. This book comes out in January. I gave it 4 stars in the end. I will say it took me a while to be like fully invested in the story. I think it was like 60% of the way through where I became like, okay, actually really interested in the story. Up until then, it was just kind of like, man, I don't know where this is going. But I am really glad that I stuck with it and didn't like DNF it earlier on, because I liked the way that it went towards the end. I would definitely recommend this if you like thrillers that involve like rich people drama and family drama and like that sort of thing. I can definitely see this becoming a favorite for many people that are into that specific type of thrillers. So in this book, we are following, I think his full name is Camden, but they call him Cam, and Jules. And Cam is the heir to this like big estate with all this money. Like his mother was this very rich woman in this small town, so everybody knew them, everybody knew the house that they lived in, Ashby House, and he wanted nothing to do with that. So he left the state as soon as he was able to when he was younger, and now there's been a death and he goes back because they have to sort out the estate. And like I said, he really just wants nothing to do with it, and it's that type of story. Lot of family drama, a lot of twists, a lot of different things. Rachel Hawkins does a fantastic job of setting the scene and describing Ashby House and where they are in this small town. It's very atmospheric, and I really enjoyed that. Okay, next one in the thriller category is The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa M. Matlin. This was a new release I got for my book of the month pick, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. This is about a woman, she's like a blogger. I don't want to say influencer, but she's a blogger, and she buys this house where a horrific murder occurred, and she plans to fix it up and blog the whole thing and then resell the house. So she moves in there with her husband, and crazy things start to happen, and she starts to think that maybe people were right and that house should have been left alone. Maybe there's some haunting going on. I really enjoyed just the vibe of this book and just the whole like haunted house, like creepy murder house type of vibe. I really love. This book was fast-paced, very quick read, and kept you guessing along the way. The reveal at the end is like, I think, one that people could love or could hate. I kind of loved it. The epilogue, once again, I could definitely see people hating this book just because of the epilogue, but I thought it was fun. I really enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars, like I said. Then I read Something in the Water by Catherine Steadman, which I ended up giving 3.5 stars, I believe. I was really intrigued with this story going in. We are basically following these two on their like honeymoon vacation, and they find something in the water when they're there that kind of makes them do things that they wouldn't normally do. I don't know how to explain it. To cover up kind of what they found and what they are going to do with what they found. It is very much like a crime thriller, I think, and it definitely focuses a lot on the characters. There's a lot of like filler. It takes like 100 or so pages for it to really actually get to the mystery thriller aspect of it. There were so many things in that book that I was reading and I was like, why am I reading this right now? Because it's not relevant to the plot at all, or really relevant to the story or getting to know the characters, at least in my opinion. So you definitely have to be into that type of book, like very character driven, and you're getting like all these extra details and getting to really know these people more than I feel like you would need to for the story to work. I wasn't a super huge fan of what it did in the end either. There were some things I predicted, some things I didn't. Overall, it was a solid thriller. I gave it 3.5 stars, but I wouldn't really come on here and rave about it and say that I love it so much and it was so good and so fantastic. I think if you want to read it, you should read it, and if this is one that you wanted to pass on, then I don't think that you're making a bad choice with that. And the same could be said for The Chateau by Jacqueline Goldis, which is the last thriller that I read this month. I gave this one 2 stars. I'm gonna be honest, I think I just kind of repressed the memory of this book because I don't remember what it was about. No, we're following this group of friends that gets invited to one of the girls' grandmother's like mansion that she lives in, the chateau. There you go, it's in the title. So they go to her chateau, and each of them has like a secret motive or a secret reason for being there, and then their grandmother is found murdered and they have to figure out who did it. And it was one of those stories, but I don't know, I just didn't vibe with the writing. I wasn't really invested in the story. I didn't like any of the characters. I feel like some of the things were very unrealistic, and I was just mostly bored. I DNF'd like probably with less than 100 pages at the end. I can't even remember. But this is definitely one that you're not missing anything if you don't read this book, and I kind of wish that I didn't read it. Anyway, moving on, our next category is sci-fi. I read 2 that could be in the sci-fi category this month. The first one was Ascension by Nicholas Binge, which I did give 4.5 stars. This book is told through like a series of letters, and we're basically following this guy as, how do I explain this? A snow-covered mountain suddenly appears in the middle of the ocean, and this man is called to come there to investigate because he's like a scientist. So they're putting together like a team of all these scientists to come to this mountain and try to figure out as much as possible as they can about it and why it's there and how it was even physically possible for this thing to just basically appear overnight. So it was weird. It was very, very weird. There's also a horror aspect to it once they're on the mountain. I don't know how to explain it. I think this is one that, once again, you should like go into knowing as little as possible because it really just takes you for a ride. I really, really enjoyed this one. I love the horror aspects of it with like these monsters that they encounter on the mountain. I love the sci-fi aspect. I love the way that it played with time and different dimensions and things like that. I really enjoyed like the way it was told through these letters from this man, and I can't even explain it, but I really, really loved it, and it's one that I definitely continue to think about, and I think that's what makes the book great. Okay, and the second sci-fi book I read was Recursion by Blake Crouch, which I did end up giving 3.5 stars. This story also plays with time a little bit, but it is mainly focused on like memory and human memory. And basically in the world, a bunch of people start waking up with memories of a life that they've never lived. Like they may wake up and they're a single person and they live on their own and they have like one type of job, and then they suddenly remember a different life that they had with a different job and a husband and children, and they kind of go crazy because to vividly remember something like that, yet it's not real and you can't have it in that timeline, I feel like definitely could drive you crazy. So we are following this guy as he kind of investigates that, and we're also following a woman who is involved more on like the science side of things and developing like a memory technology. So it was very, very interesting. I gave it 3.5 stars though because I felt like the middle kind of dragged, or not the middle, the end, like the later half of the book kind of dragged. I think a lot of things could have been cut out and still made a good story. I don't know how to explain it. Overall, I thought it was a great book. I tabbed some things just because there were so many like interesting quotes and interesting things brought up about like human nature and like memory and the way that we live our lives, and it definitely has a lot of thinking to be done while you're reading, but I feel like after the book was done, I didn't really think about it too much. Okay, the next category is romance. I read 2 romance books this month. The first one was The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. I gave this one 4 stars, which I was really happy about because The Soulmate Equation I gave 2 stars. I really disliked that book. But this one I really enjoyed. Basically, we are following Fizzy, who was a side character in The Soulmate Equation, and she is a romance author, and she gets approached by this guy to go on this dating show. Eventually, she accepts the offer. She goes on this dating show with 8 different guys, but she kind of has a thing for the producer, like the guy that invited her to this in the first place. So there was a lot of tension with that because like she has to really put on a show for this, like, and date these 8 other guys, and he has to watch her date these other guys, and there's a lot of tension, a lot of like forbidden type of romance because like the network that they work for, like they can't have any of that stuff, like the actors and the producers getting together. So it was very interesting. I love Fizzy's character. She was one character that I did like in The Soulmate Equation, so I was very happy that we were getting a book about her. Also, there were a lot of things to be said about like the romance genre and how Fizzy as a romance author, people look down on her and say, okay, like when are you gonna write like your real book? Or people that read romance, how they get looked down upon because it's like not seen as like real books or things like that, which is absolutely ridiculous. So I like that that book kind of talked on that. Overall, I did really enjoy it, would recommend, gave it 4 stars. The second romance that I read was not so great. That was Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. I give this book 1 star. Really, at the end of the day, I just thought it was dumb. Like, there was no chemistry. So we're following this girl who, her mother owns like this inn by the lake, and she worked there as a teenager. Obviously, like, she lived down there, and as a teenager she got with this other guy that was there, and they dated for like years, and then she left. She went to college, and while she's in college in this big city and her boyfriend of 4 years is back at this like lake inn, he's still there, she meets this other guy in the city, and they spend one day together, and it's supposedly like the most fantastic, spectacular day of her life because she never stops thinking about it. And they make a plan to meet at the lake 1 year from then, and he never shows up. So now it's like years into the future and they're adults and he comes back. So they have this whole like rekindling, I guess, and like she really gets on him, like, why did you not show up? Like, what happened in your life? I don't know. I just think the whole thing was dumb because, like, first of all, she had a boyfriend of 4 years, but like this man was so fantastic that she just like didn't care. She like forgot about him. I don't know. To me, their one day that they spent together in the city like was not anything special. I don't understand why she like pined after this guy for years while she was in a relationship. Like, I don't understand. They had 0 chemistry. I don't know. None of it made sense to me. I gave it 1 star because I just thought it was dumb and I didn't enjoy it. And the last 3 books that I read in September are just kind of general fiction. So the first one is 5 Little Indians by Michelle Good. This one I read because it was the highest rated book on my Goodreads TBR, and I gave it 2.5 stars. I think the reason, and I said this in the vlog where I did it too, I think the reason that it has such a high rating is because it tells a story of Native American children in residential schools and the way that that trauma affects them throughout their adult life. And I think that's certainly an important topic to learn about and to read about and to write about. but the writing of this author and the execution of this specific story was not good. So I think just because a book talks about an important topic doesn't objectively make it a good book. I really couldn't get past a lot of the writing. A lot of the dialogue in this was just awkward and like hard to read, and that's why I gave it 2.5 stars. There are also some things that I wish would have been like explored more in depth with the certain characters and different things that happen to them and the way that they are in their adult life. Next up is Swamp Story by Dave Barry, which tells the story of Florida Man, really, at the end of the day. We're following a couple of different timelines in this book. We have this guy named Slater and his friend, and they think that they're gonna make like this super cool reality TV show out in the Florida Everglades. Slater has a girlfriend whose name is Jess, and they have a daughter whose name is Willa. Slater doesn't really kind of care about them, honestly. He's not a good father or a good boyfriend. So Jess is really trying to get herself and her daughter out of that situation. Then we're following these two brothers out in the Everglades. They have a bait shop and they're trying to come up with like a marketing ploy to get more customers. There is like this whole thing they try to do where they make like a Everglades like swamp monster, and they try to make a viral video out of that. It was just a very silly and fun, lighthearted read. There were some parts that were a little bit like anxiety inducing and a little bit suspenseful with like the Jess and Willa storyline, because she kind of gets into a dangerous situation as she's trying to leave her living situation. But overall, it was just a very like no brain power needed, like fun read. I don't know. I can't really even explain why I liked it so much. I just thought it was fun and refreshing and nice to not have to think really hard about a book. And the last one was Pizza Girl by Jean Kyung Fraser. This one I gave 3 stars. This is about a woman. I think she's 18. She's pregnant and she's working at this pizza place. A woman calls one day and says, "Hey, can I get a pizza with pickles on it?" And she decides, you know, the restaurant doesn't really do that, but this lady sounds nice, so I'm gonna do that for her. And then they kind of develop a friendship that maybe blossoms into a little bit something more. And they just have a very interesting relationship, and it's kind of like really a story about this girl who is just navigating her life being fresh out of high school, let alone being fresh out of high school and pregnant, and she doesn't know what she really wants, but everybody around her is saying, "Oh, you're gonna be such a great mother, like it's such a blessing to have a child," and she's kind of thinking to herself like, "I don't know if I actually want this." So just kind of navigating her life and developing a friendship with this other woman. It was definitely an interesting read. It was a short read, a quick read. It went a little bit different at the end. I didn't really enjoy the way it ended. I think there wasn't really any, like, what is the word? I don't know, no satisfaction to the ending. I wish that there was a little bit more to the book. I wish it was just like slightly longer and some more time was spent on character development and just doing something with the story, because it really feels like nothing came of the story at the end. I don't know. So those are all 16 books that I read in September. Some were better than others. Let me know if you guys have read any of these, if you share my thoughts and opinions. If not, that's okay too. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next time.